At that point, they gave me the line haul contract from Hickory to Kernersville. Now, it was just an assignment at that point. We didn't actually own the routes back then. They would assign you a different route, and that was my line haul assignment, you might say. FedEx and RPS never gave us the routes. They would always assign us routes, and you would keep that as long as you were in good graces with RPS and you did your route right and everything else. You would keep your route, but you never actually had an ownership of those routes back then. So we'll talk about that as we go further. But I did that for a couple of years, and I was able to put on a second truck and a second driver. A good friend of mine, Gerald Richardson, he came on as a friend. He and I had worked at Carolina Freight together, so he came on, and I bought a second truck, and then we had two routes out of out of Hickory going to Kernersville. And they were all at night. These were all nighttime runs. So what we would do, we would get the packages and everything that the vans had gotten, and they'd sort them and put them in the trailers, and then we would take them down to Kernersville at night. So I put on the second truck, and we would run two routes a piece at night usually. And what we would do, they would get enough trailers and everything in, so we would at that point we would run two. Now sometimes it would slow down, we wouldn't run but one, but that was the thing. And then of course I would be the guy that would not run usually, or Jerry may not run. Just depended. We were growing with the business as the business grew, and within this second truck again, I bought another good used truck. I actually bought it from Carolina Freight. They were selling off some of their single axle trucks, single axle sleepers, and I bought one from them. And we were doing pretty good with that, and we continued on doing that. And then the business expanded, and they wanted me to start running local pickup and deliveries with the tractor trailer truck. And I'd done a few spots, but then they started adding on non-productive things for me. So I really got upset with that, and I didn't really like that. And I was given an opportunity to move my trucks to Kernersville. So what I did, I basically gave up my routes in Hickory and moved my trucks to Kernersville, which was a hub. And with hub routes, you could get some daytime routes, and plus you would get a better selection of routes. So what I did, I did that starting. Okay, I started in '87, and then this was '88. This was probably late '89, going into '90 that this happened. And then I did that for several years, and then I knew the opportunity was going to be growing because Kernersville was a small hub. I knew that they were going to outgrow that, and I'd heard the rumblings in the background that they were going to move something to Charlotte. Well, Charlotte was ideal for me. Kernersville was a little bit far away, but Charlotte was not. So I had an opportunity to maybe put something into Charlotte when they started a hub. But I grew the business and got up to 3 routes in Kernersville, and was able to, like I said, I put 3 trucks. I had 3 trucks on at that time, and was able to maintain 3 routes in Kernersville. And it was a long haul. I had to drive down there, and of course I hired some drivers that were from the area. So my drivers were from the Kernersville area, and I did not have to drive every single day. But it was a start of something good for me because the routes were paying pretty good. Well, pretty good on those days' terms. And they're paying way better now. but I saw the progression of where it was going. I saw that RPS was going to continue to grow, and they were competing more and more with UPS. And then when I'm trying to think when the strike was. I think it was, well, actually, the strike was back in the late 80s because my father was still alive. Uh, they, they had a strike. This is one thing, and I was still at the Hickory terminal. UPS went on strike, and they struck for and had a shutdown of their services for, I want to say, about 5 or 6 weeks, maybe less. It seemed like a long time. But during that turmoil, RPS was just inundated. I mean, we were gridlocks, what we were. We got so much business because these people had to have their packages moved, and UPS wasn't available. I mean, they completely shut down. They completely shut down their pipeline. And all these businesses were saying, well, what do we do? What do we do? We're going to give it to RPS. Well, it overwhelmed RPS. But in the meantime, it actually let RPS expand. And then the good thing about it, they started expanding more, and they started adding more routes. And they were able to sell the fact that don't put all your eggs in one basket with UPS. We're an alternative. So if UPS decides to strike, we are an alternative. And it really helped RPS grow. Well, at that time, RPS would only let us get three trucks was the max. And they continued that practice on for a number of years. 3 trucks would be the max. We couldn't put on any more than that. So I had my 3 trucks max when I was down in Kernersville. And I worked that for several years. And then they started expanding, and they opened up a brand new hub, a big hub in Charlotte, North Carolina, way bigger than they had in Kernersville. It was probably, I want to say, 3 times the size of that. Well, they kind of honored seniority at that point. We actually couldn't say it because they didn't want us to be union, but they honored our seniority of our start dates, and it all was reflective by our truck numbers. Now, my original tractor trailer truck was 1527. Nationwide, they started with tractor 1000. So out of the entire nation, I was one of 500 trucks, a little over one of the first 500 line haul units. And then every time we added trucks, we got new numbers, of course. You couldn't retain that, like I said, that 1527. I kind of hold it dear to my heart because it's in my email. My email has my name and 1527. I kind of I've kept that number in my email because it is a very it's a special number to me. So, but to get back to the trucking, we continued to grow with RPS, and I saw the potential. And then when they opened up the hub in Charlotte, I was able to move all 3 of my trucks back to Charlotte. And now I'm only 27 miles away from the hub instead of 150 miles when I was in Kernersville. So it was a big plus for me, big plus. And by getting moved back, they assigned me three routes. And I was able to get 3 routes. Now, again, these routes were just assigned. They weren't permanent. They weren't. We didn't have an ownership of those routes, but they would let us bid on something that came new each time. And that being said, I mean it was somewhat fair. I mean, although, and I say somewhat because there was some favoritism back then because it wasn't the stringent rules and regulation that's in place right now with FedEx. But they did let us retain our seniority. and they kept doing that. Then they changed it after a while. They changed it from strictly our seniority of when we started to a point system. And then the point system came about later on. And I can't remember. I'll have to think about it. If it was FedEx or RPS that started the point system. I really don't. It's been so long ago. I don't remember which one started it. But anyway, we continued on with that, and I was able to make some money, and I actually started a graphics business. And at this time, back in the 90s, my son was in college at NC State, and we actually started an internet business, and because the internet was getting going good. And this is prior to anything. This was back when AOL was the main thing. It was a dial-up service, but people weren't aware of internet service providers. And what I did, I was able to had some money from the trucking company and everything. And my son was down at NC State as an engineer, and he was a computer engineer, and he's the one that kind of turned me on to this at the very beginning, because he was doing that, and he said, "Boy, this is something, Dad, and we ought to check into that." And he knew that I was always into technology, so we did. We checked into it, and we started an internet service providing business here in 3 or 4 counties, and we called it Catawba Valley Internet at that point. And we grew the business. It was new. There wasn't anything other than AOL, and people had to dial long distance in some places to get onto the internet back then. We started a local number, local provider, and we were able to start that business. Now, I'm venturing away from the, I ventured away from the trucking a little bit, because I kind of got to explain how my business grew. But anyway, we grew this internet business pretty good, and it was sort of parallel with how my trucking business was running. My trucking business could only grow up to 3 trucks at that point, so I couldn't do anything more than that. I mean, I was at the max. I could get newer runs if they came available, but I had to, 3 trucks was all I could get. I wasn't getting anything else. Now, all my runs were single operation runs. I could have gotten team runs, but I didn't really want to do teams, because I knew that would be more headache. And of course, if we had difficulties with a unit, I would be responsible, if it's in California, to get it back and do this. And I would have to have even a newer, fancier piece of equipment too. So I maintained 3 good local trucks, and was able to do that for several years. Well, like I said, in parallel with that, my son, my wife, and I, and my daughter, we all started this internet business. Now, my wife, and I've got to bring her into the picture too. My wife was a school teacher at the time. My wife was a 8th grade math teacher, so she taught math during the day. And then in the afternoon, she would help me with the internet business. And then when I wasn't driving, and I drove about half the time then, because I had hired 3 drivers, tried to maintain 3 drivers, and would pick up extra runs as we could. So I did a lot of hustling to grow the business, grow my internet business, and grow just the whole general concept of what we were doing. Well, the internet business was doing really good, so I was able to kind of coast with my RPS trucks at that point. As long as I kept good drivers and kept the equipment up, I was doing pretty good, and I didn't have to drive on a daily basis. So I was able to grow my internet business. Well, I did that for a number of years, and we grew it up to several thousand customers in 7 counties. And then I got bought out. I had the guy that we had actually originally purchased the rights to this area told me one day, he said, Mike, I'll probably want to buy you back out. Well, come to be, he was bought out first. And then the company that bought him out, it was Concord Telephone at that point, and they wanted to buy my portion of the internet. So they came to me with an offer, and they bought my internet business back. And I was glad to do it because we made a good profit. I was able to do some things I wasn't able to do, able to expand my trucking business a little bit. I was able to purchase some newer equipment. So it was all good. It was all good for us. And we did rather good, rather well, I mean. And about that time, I don't have the dates in front of me, but it was in the late 90s. FedEx came in and bought RPS. And then that was a good thing because FedEx had implemented a few things that were pretty good. So we were able to go under the umbrella of FedEx. But initially, they didn't give us the name FedEx Ground. They initially just had us stay as RPS, and then it went to I forget what it was called, but they finally bit the bullet and they changed the name of RPS completely to FedEx Ground. And then when they did that, you could really see the company grow at that point. And they saw an opportunity to let us grow, so they let us go up to 5 trucks. So I took the initiative, and we went up to 5 trucks. I got 5 routes. And like I said, you had to kind of work to get these routes. But they were still giving us these routes if we kind of earned them on a merit-type basis. Now, like I say, sometimes you felt like you were getting dealt a fair deal. Sometimes you weren't. And but FedEx started changing those with the point system. And when they changed the point system, they let everybody see where they stood within the company. I mean, you knew if you had an opportunity, if a bid came up, if your points were at a certain location, you could maybe beat out this person, and this person. And because you generally, what you had to do, you had to, when you added trucks, you had to go on to the extra board. Now you were gaining points, but you were still as an extra. And then after you got so far into the system, if your points designated that you could get something, then you could increase it.